Why don't we talk a little bit more about Cody and your time in the museum world and some of the fun things that you've experienced there? What was maybe some of the most interesting guns that you've come across in your time as a curator?
Oh, goodness. I personally like, if you read any of my expert testimonies that are public, I like, the firearms technology that's far more advanced than we assume was developed,
Mm-hmm.
at a particular time. And so some of the most interesting pieces in Cody are ones that, really predate your concept of that invention. One of the ones that I'm going to use that Danny will use often is the Burton light machine rifle. And it's an amazing example of technology ahead of its time, but also how we drive the development of technology. And so the Burton light machine rifle is a selective fire, twin top mount magazine, detachable magazine firearm that takes an interchangeable cartridge, and is single soldier portable. And it was developed. And if you are aware of the words that I am saying, you will know that in the 1970 manual of the Defense Intelligence Agency, that is how you define an assault rifle. I know I don't make friends when I say those terms, but assault rifle and assault weapon are very different terms.
Yes.
Just an assault rifle is a selective fire gun, unless you're within a state law that changes it. So like California state law actually has a different definition for assault rifle, but the historical one are the words that I just said.
Yes.
So
comes from the Sturmgewehr, right? The literal assault rifle in Germany.
Yeah. So, and that's, so you're talking like 1917 for the Burton. And you're talking the end of World War II for the Sturmgewehr, and then moving on from that. And so we're talking decades, and we're talking a different world war. So he develops this guy named Frank Burton, who was the son of James Burton, who's very a famous designer during the 1800s at Harper's Ferry. So legacy family. And so he's designing this gun, and obviously the hope would be to implement it during the war, but the war ends, so it really doesn't go out of prototype mode. And that's what you see a lot. Like you get these really, intricate inventions, and then the war ends and it's like, oh, never mind. And with earlier technology, you'd see that really advanced technology, even rifling in the 1400s, doesn't have a practical battlefield application. So it becomes a civilian, kind of a civilian trait within a firearm, a hunting arm, a target shooting arm. And so I'm fascinated by that kind of thing. So the Burton is a great example of that. It's also very popular in the video game world. Cody is the only example, but yet nobody asked us. I think it's Battlefield 1. Dan, I'm going to embarrass Dan because it's probably not the right. What's also interesting about that is that, and this is where scholarship is, and it's constantly changing, is that there was history about the fact that they used incendiary rounds as well, with the intention to shoot down balloons. However, when you actually look at the manual and all the ammo they use, there's no evidence of that. Oh. So that's been something that was debunked, although I think you can use incendiary rounds in the video game. So there's that piece of technology. There's early magazine technology from the 1600s. We have this really wonky 4-barrel gun that gas seals together from the 1600s that belonged to the Earl of Meath in Scotland. Wow. So it's seeing that this is not just a linear narrative of you have a hand cannon, then you have a matchlock, then you have a wheel lock, and then you have multiple variations on a flintlock, and then a percussion, and so on and so on. So at the museum, we put a timeline in that started with our earliest crossbow, and then went all the way up through modern day. And we actually have 3D printed guns in the museum, and that was a fascinating process. So we started with the oldest, and then on the one side, it's the, development of the firearm, the overarching linear narrative. And on the other side, it's, hey, here's the same time frame, and here's all these other technologies that existed and why they were important for this part of the culture or not, so that you could see the yin and yang almost of it. And so that's probably the most significant thing for me, especially when you look at collection pieces, because where some of these things are commissioned or one-offs because, again, it's a civilian, firearm for the most part, especially over in Europe.
Right.
They're one-offs. But let's think about the fact that, maybe they're not always one-offs because they survived. You've got how many surviving guns that were produced for a specific military contract. It could be a lot, it could not be, but then you say, here's one gun that belonged to one person because he had a commission. How did it survive 400 years? And that's actually, I think, is something I'm recently kind of starting to think about. It's fascinating that those are what survived, and why would they have survived, and how did they survive? And a lot of them have been passed down by collectors. So the person who had it built was an avid gun owner and collector, and then they pass it down the line. But that part is also interesting, is these things that maybe weren't made in mass somehow survive for us to see them for the most part.